Welcome in, everybody. I am Ben Parker, and that is Shane Ratliff, and we really appreciate all of you coming in tonight to watch this with us. We are covering more NFL draft prospects for the 26th draft. Excuse me, this great wall that you see here on the screen, that's 66 guys that we've already covered. You can find most of them already on Pro Football Enterprises, which would be for some of you the channel you're already watching. Others of them in the future, say the three at the bottom there, Bain, Delane, and Downs, will only be found on Box Score Network. We'll probably put our defensive players over on Box Score only for the foreseeable future. But listen, between Pro Football Enterprises and Box Score Network, you can get all of these guys. Some of them are individually listed. Matter of fact, moving forward, that's really the only way we're going to do most of these guys is individual listings to make it easier for you to watch the guy you want to watch. But a lot of these are listed by group, and we covered them in a group series as well. 66 guys, though. We're going to add three more this evening. It'll be in separate format, but we're going to be covering Chris Brazzell from Tennessee tonight. 6'5", 200 pounds. To this point in the season, and some of you might be watching this a little bit later after the season is even over, perhaps, but our evaluation will still be good on this player. It will not change too much during the last, 5, 6 games of the year. But so far, he's at 39 catches, 600 receiving yards. That comes out to 15.4 yards per catch and 7 touchdowns so far. Shane, I got a whole page full of notes here, man, but I'm going to let you start first, and then we'll kick it back to you after I get through with all of my notes. So, Shane, as always, glad to have you on board. Go ahead and tell us about Chris Brazzell from Tennessee.
Okay, Ben, I think the easy thing about Chris is you kind of cover what some people can see without a lot of in-depth reading. Um, Great height, still manages to run about a 4.5 from what reports are. Um, the thing that jumps out for me is he has freakish bend, great job at sinking the hips for somebody as big as he is. Tracking the ball, and in this picture, I specifically like he does a great job of high pointing.
Yes.
Um, when you look at his stats, you just kind of broke those down, Ben. But one thing I think is important for people to understand is that a good chunk of that came against Georgia. He had 6 catches for like 177, 78 yards, somewhere right around there, and 3 of those touchdowns. So you can't say this is, getting yardage and points against FCS teams.
Right.
I, the thing for me that showed up when we're talking about weaknesses is concentration. I think he's a guy that's super talented, does a great job getting to the ball, catching the ball, but you can see some lapses. Um, the other thing is with his body frame, not much of a blocker. Um, Again, not really asked to be that way. The other positive for him is his father was a draft pick for the New York Jets. NFL scouting gurus love to see that you got a bloodline. They can project where you are. They've seen things that your father's done, your uncle's done. They love to see those type of things.
Right.
Um, Measuring against some of the guys we've already talked about, I think he's having a good year, not a great year right now. It kind of in a transition for where the way Tennessee's going right now, but just a guy that scouts are gonna salivate over, especially if because he's kind of like a 4.48 guy, 4.47, where they say like, he's not really a 4.5. They'll never want to say he's a 4.5 guy, and he would prefer not to show that. So, I think if he has a great combine, it's still a junior, so he has a decision to make. But I think you're going to see somebody that's freakish athletic, um, and if they can button up some of those concentration issues, that I think he'll be a very high draft choice.
And we'll come back to you for just how high at this point you might be thinking about him, or even looking ahead 6 months where you think you'll maybe end up. I'll get back to you. I'm going to read off my notes, and for those of you who don't like being read to, I don't like being read to, so I apologize for the inconvenience. But man, I'm studying, five guys a week. I have a page full of notes for each guy. I just cannot, I'm not sharp enough to remember all these things, unfortunately. Some of you are, I'm not, so that's why I read off the notes. But here we go. We'll get back to Shane here in a couple of minutes, some of which Shane has already said. There'll be some overlap, of course, and then I've got some more things that he did not yet get to. Love the height, obviously. And he plays up to that height. He's good above the rim, if you will. Shane, you already mentioned it. Him high pointing the ball, a number tracking the ball. He lives up to that height. You can see him using that height. He really plays very well. He also seems to have a good vertical jump, which kind of adds to the height. I'm not saying he's got an insane jump, but he's got a good athletic vertical jump, which adds to what he's doing. I mean, that really seems to be, and that is the strength of his game, right? Going up, getting the ball. He's got the height. He's got the vertical jump. So I really like that. That is hard to come by. Not too many guys can offer that. So just right off the top, he's got that. I thought he has good soft hands and consistent too. Now, um, there are some drops and some mental lapses, guaranteed. But I like the way that when he's focusing, I like the way he catches the football. It's just good soft hands. That part is reliable. Dropping fewer passes in 25 than in 24. You mentioned those mental lapses. That it is there. It's there in 25 as well, but it was there more in 24. So I was glad that he cleaned that up some. But still, I'm going to hit those mental lapses more later on from a very different angle than pass catching. But just keep that in mind right there. Can certainly win deep and have big plays, but does not appear to have top end speed. You hit that hard already. I just do not see him consistently outrunning anybody. Every once in a while, if he catches a cornerback off guard, he may can burn him deep if the CB doesn't have safety help. But generally speaking, I don't consider him slow. I just do not consider him having that true top end breakaway speed where the cornerbacks are having difficulty keeping up with him. What he's really typically doing more often than not is out jumping them on these deep balls or out reaching them with his height. Let's see. Does not break many tackles. You already mentioned his light frame. He's just not going to break many tackles. That's not his DNA. Oh well. That's just not something he's going to have in his career. Does not consistently produce a lot of rack, except a lot of run after the catch. He doesn't produce a lot of that except when he's running through zones on crossing routes. Okay. He's pretty good at crossing routes, going through the zones. And when he's got that, you will see him pick up a fair amount of yards after the catch there. But typically speaking, he's over on the boundary, he's catching these deep passes. He's not going to get a lot of yards after the catch. His damage will be done before he actually catches the football. Is not particularly elusive. We'll talk about some other guys. We have talked about some other receivers who kind of had the shake and bake or the wiggle. That's just not him. He's just not going to produce a lot of that. I don't want to say zero, but he's not going to typically win that way. He does not win physically too often. He's not physically dominant. He's just not. We've talked about guys like Malachi Fields and Denzel Boston who produce much more of that physicality. We've talked about Jacoby Lane from Southern Cal who produce a lot more of that physic. This is not Brazzell. Brazzell is not going to beat you up physically. That's just not his game either. So, has good athleticism and seems to have good short area quickness for a tall boundary receiver. You said it differently and better than I did, but you mentioned that bend that he has, that ability to kind of get low and move. That's the short area quickness that I see, and he does use that. Not on the deep catches, but he does use that. So, that's the same thing I saw, and you said it in a very different and better way. Very smooth, very natural when he moves anywhere on the field. That always makes me feel good about a guy. If they look natural and smooth, I feel a lot better about them, and he does. Can produce deep at the boundary and over the middle. I always look for those three things, right? So he can produce deep, he can produce over the middle, and he can produce at the boundary. So that's three different ways that he's got of winning, and that means a lot to me. If I'm going to draft a guy somewhere high, whether it's first, second round, the fact that he can win at three different areas of the field, I feel a lot better about that. So he can do that. His routes seem good and clean. It's not like he's running a complicated route tree, though. I think he's got maybe three or four routes in his bag. So it's not like he's running 10 different routes or 12 different routes and he's got the Jordan Tyson wiggle through the zone crap. He's got three or four routes. He runs them clean. They're fine. That's about it, but they're effective, So I'm happy with that. That's fine. Blocking. Okay, he will throw some effective blocks on occasion. I've seen it. It's on tape. They're on occasion. When he knows it's his job to do it, he will run and go hit the guy. But that's about it. Okay. There's no technique involved there. There's no sustaining the block there, and in fact, he's going to miss several blocks. Does not consistently seem adept at or interested in being a good blocker. It just does not seem to bother him too much. He really does not seem interested in developing as a blocker, being a good blocker. You see it time after time after time. He's just not too worried about it. In fact, uh, it's best not to run sweeps or screens to his side, and they usually don't. Matter of fact, that's kind of a tell for the defense. If he's out there on
Mm.
that side, they're probably not going to run a sweep or a screen over to that side because he's just not going to produce much on average. Every once in a while, he'll get a good hit. That's it. So, that's something that the defense can kind of work with there when they know that they're not going to run those screens or sweeps to his side. I've got a couple more things here. We'll let Shane jump back in. Shane, I appreciate you being patient here. While he is good at running through or across zones, he does not yet seem to have any natural feel for settling into holes in the zone. Okay, he just hasn't shown that. I'm not saying he can't learn that, but he hasn't yet shown that he can settle into spots in the zone. He kind of looks lost. Sometimes, in fact, he's kind of hidden behind a defender after his original route kind of pans out, right? So run him through the zones, keep him moving. He'll be effective at that. But as far as settling into pockets in the zone, haven't yet seen anything like that. Seems decidedly and pointedly uninterested in selling any of his routes if he knows the play isn't coming to him or to his side. That's not unusual for some wide receivers, but it seems to be a little extreme with him. Man, I've seen this several times from him, from several games, and I mean in 2025, not just 24. 2025 tape, it's there. Matter of fact, there's one play where he's in the end zone about 20 yards away, and he thinks the play's not coming to him. He's just kind of standing there. All of a sudden, he sees the quarterback scrambling. He runs and kind of gets open, scores I think either scored a touchdown or got the ball on the 1 yard line. But, right there's a play where he's just not even trying. So I don't like the effort there. That bothered me a little bit. Again, he can win deep, has enough speed, but he's out jumping and out handsing defensive backs. He's not outrunning anybody. Last thing, Tennessee quarterbacks are not looking at him as their first or second option or for a lot of production. You mentioned that. But when they need a big play, he's exactly where they look. Every time they need a big play, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 11, that's where they're looking every single time. They're just going straight to him. They're really not even hiding it. Sometimes he's got a man over the top, sometimes he don't, but that's where they're going. So the more I watched, the less impressed I was by the effort. I didn't downgrade him on the effort, but it's just a note that I didn't really like the effort consistently. So, all right. Shane, that's a lot of notes. We're going to let you jump back in here, talk about anything you want, and then I definitely want to hear about where you might be looking at drafting him.
Well, I think you definitely went deeper, Ben, on some of those weaknesses I kind of covered. Threw a lot of them into the pot in one grouping, but
Right.
I think the most dangerous thing you talked about is I called it concentration, but there's also a level of disinterest when you see him out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
To have the physical talent and the ability that he has, like when you said, when he steps up against Georgia, has an outstanding game. And when a play is needed, that they'll go after him. But you look at this type of talent, and you're wondering why this guy isn't Jeremiah Smith. He's not a. Why isn't he a Lemon? Why are we not looking in different ways to get him the ball? I,
Right.
I think the one that shows the most for me, like you mentioned the tosses that there's a lot of times where I'm going to pick and choose where I'm going to toss the ball with a wide receiver as my lead blocker, but the
Right.
screen one really surprises me because they they love to throw vertical to him, which is normally a great feed for a screen behind it. You want that guy to blast off the line thinking that he's going on a wide nine, and then all he has to do is stalk a wide receiver for a little while. They never throw a screen in his direction. They don't
Yeah.
want him to be the point man on any of those. They'll sub in, way less talented guys, and I would think that it's a huge read from the defensive coordinator to know exactly what they're going to look for out of him.
Right.
The problem being a defensive coordinator is that he's still 6'5" and 200 pounds, can jump, has great hips, super athletic. So the time when you don't cover him is the time that he goes for an 85 yarder. It's that mix and match. But the thing is, when you talk about his level of disinterest, that's scouts see that as well. So if I'm the coach, a coach GM that's looking to draft him, I'm talking to everybody in the room. Why doesn't this kid work hard? What's the magic that you guys haven't been able to figure out? Why does he play hard for these guys? He doesn't play hard for them. The interesting thing for him is he went to Tulane, got injured, then made it to Tennessee. He had a huge redshirt freshman year for Tulane, makes it to Tennessee. They expect, he's going to be, just blow up and what he can do. And then you see things like this. Um, so you wonder where all that comes from. My draft from him, like on a full athletic side, I think he's a late first, early second round guy. The problem is I don't see a full package out of him. So I think he's probably going to drop into a late third, you know, fourth round guy. Maybe he's a day two guy, maybe he's day two, day three guy where if some team gets him and they can kind of get some psychology into why he does what he does, or if they can just get him to understand, like, if you want to get paid, this is what you're going to have to do. He's a guy to take a flyer on, but I think his actions during the games are what's going to hurt him come draft time.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. That's a great, and that's where your XO strength comes in about running the screens. Typically, you would want to run the screens behind the receiver who's got the ability to take off on you and beat you downfield. They're typically not doing that when he's on the field. That's very good stuff. Um, on the hot end, the athletic side, the talent side, I came in right where you came in. I would have no problem drafting him late first round based on the talent that I see. I mean, it's there. There's not that many guys that are 6'5" who also show that they can high point and vertical jump and beat you consistently deep, and he does. I mean, he did it against Kentucky. The Kentucky stats aren't even on this sheet here. He can do that, right? But when I came back to some of the limitations that I saw, right, not particularly physical, enough speed, but not burner speed, and then the other things that I talked about, I came in at middle of the second round is where I came in at. If I were doing the picking. Now, my low end was like early third round because, like you mentioned, if a team and the scouts will, if a team looks at that lack of concentration, lack of effort, however you want to label it or package it, right? If the team looks at that and that bothers them, and then they also bring him in for an interview and they're not thrilled with the interview, he'll drop for them. They may just say, no, thanks. We'll see you in the third or fourth round if you're there, right? Other teams, it won't matter as much. They'll be like, no, we see the talent. We're glad to have you. I came in middle of the second round is about where I landed. I didn't actually punish him for that effort concentration thing, but some organizations will. Some organizations will look at that and say, we're not using a second round pick on that, unfortunately. So, all right, Shane, last word here on Chris Brazzell, man.
Uh, Talent wasted is how I would put it, Ben.
Yeah.
I think this is a guy that could really show outstanding skills in the SEC. And like I said, not being on the inside, you don't really know what this plays into, because you got to imagine that coaches would be riding him endlessly if it's just a sheer fact of him not wanting to. You know, they
Right.
there's a lot of ways that you can induce people to work. You can pay them more NIL. You can cut their time. I think the cutting time thing is kind of going away because with the portal, if a guy gets a feeling that he's not liked by the coaches, he's going to go find somebody else that's going to treat him the way he expects to be treated. So, um, but for me, right now it's a waste. I see freakish athletic ability. The bend is what really surprised me. When he needs to get in and out of breaks, he doesn't have a great route tree, but when he needs to, he can really turn and get some motion. Like you said, close area agility for somebody his size is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But I think right now you look at it, hard pressed to say, like you said, rightfully so. He's like a third option in Tennessee's offense, which is ridiculous when you think
Right.
about what you can see him on tape.
Right. Yeah. All right, Shane. Excellent work tonight. Really, really appreciate it. Everybody, this was our chance to talk. You get your chance in the comments. So I don't try to respond to the comments. If y'all want to carry the conversation on further in the comments, maybe you're seeing something different than we're seeing, or maybe you're seeing the same thing we're seeing. You're more than welcome to hop in and have your voice in the comments. Thank you everybody for watching. This is Box Score Network, Pro Football Enterprises working together. So we really appreciate it. And that's Chris Brazzell, Tennessee.